It rain, all right. All right, all right, all right. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Ba, 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 ba. Oh, have to edit the description. Edit, 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 edit. We are here. Yes, yes. Whew, okay, so I did all of that. Now, let's see. Um, okay, honey. Okay, honey. It's so stressful. Still learning how to do this. Hold on. Is this it? Welcome to. Perfect. Okay. Okay. All right. So I got to give it a bit. AKA Dreamer, who knows? Ocean Tide, Lean. Yeah, don't be stressed. Right. Sure. Yeah. Sure. Go just a little bit for I'm excited too. Oh my goodness. It's good. I think that it's good. So we'll see, right? We'll see. My little studio there. There's too much junk up here now. It's too much junk. I posted everything, I think, properly, right? So the members can see that now. Yes. Yes. You guys can. That's how you got the link here. Takes a few minutes for them to go out. Hey, Pug. Shazama. You just finished the first part. This is going to be part 2. So, I know it takes a minute for the notifications and stuff, so just to Michelle. Yeah, that might be easier, right? Everybody calls you AKA. Hey, Romeo. Hey, Monique. Is this phone charged? It is. It is. Which one do I have my Bluetooth connected to? This one? I don't even know. I don't even know. That one. Wrong one. Now, okay, good. Good afternoon. I have a good amount of part 3 written. I've already got the next case. And I have some stuff for my regular channel too, so we'll be working on that. This one was interesting to do, but it was hard. It was a rough one. You guys will see why. It's an emotional one. So, how's everybody else doing today? Hopefully you guys are good. Michelle's so calm. It's hard, yeah. Hi, Angelique. Yeah, everybody's Michelle, right? So that's true. Ooh. All right. I do have it on rewind. So I have the rewind thing enabled. I know I told people 1:30, but I have to get a whole bunch of stuff done. Hey, Amanda. Good, Miss Monique. I'm good. I've got to do chores while I'm listening with you guys. That's the plan. Do some chores while we're listening. You know. Hey, AJ. Ocean. Are these charged? I don't even know anymore. What are you listening? What is this? Oh. I don't even know what the hell that is. I don't even know how I'm listening to that, but apparently I am. Y'all are ready? I am ready too. I'm ready to hear it back in my headphones and see if the sound is okay, because just hearing it on the speakers over and over is just making me nuts. So let's go. I need to share a tab. Which one is it? That one. I hope so. All right, there it is. There it is. So I'm gonna take myself out of here. And we are going to get started. My fish are acting loony, but let's just check and make sure the sound's not too loud.
Welcome to Chasing the Lost. This podcast contains adult themes and violence and is not intended for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
We left off with Shanda getting in the car, thinking she was going to speak to Amanda. How does the sound sound? The sound. I'm going to close the door so all of that background noise isn't in there. Hey, Lucy. Did the sound okay? You guys could hear it good? All right. Okay. There's an echo? You hear an echo. Okay, wait a minute. wait a minute. Let me make sure that I am sharing with the audio. Let's see how this sounds.
Welcome to Chasing the Lost. This podcast contains adult themes and violence and is not intended for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
We left off with Shanda getting in the car, thinking she was going to speak to Amanda.
How does that sound? Better? Better. Now there's an echo. Is it an echo when I talk or of the podcast? Echo. What the shit? Wait, let me try something. Tell me now.
Welcome to Chasing the Lost. This podcast contains adult themes and violence and is not intended for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
We left off with Shanda getting in the car, thinking she was going to speak to Amanda. Unfortunately, this was not the case.
Okay, was there an echo then or that was better? That was better. All right. Great. Perfect. Yes. Okay, because, I don't know what I'm doing half the time. Here we go.
Welcome to Chasing the Lost. This podcast contains adult themes and violence and is not intended for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
We left off with Shanda getting in the car, thinking she was going to speak to Amanda. Unfortunately, this was not the case. The girls waiting in the car had nothing good planned for Shanda. Hope pulled out of Shanda's dad's driveway and began to drive towards Witch's Castle. Shanda was crying the entire time, begging Melinda not to hurt her. Melinda was getting more agitated with each question she asked Shanda. Did you go to the haunted house with Amanda at Harvest Homecoming? Did you and Amanda have sex? Amanda knows I'm going to kill you. She wants you dead just as much as I do. The girls arrived at Witch's Castle. Lori and Melinda dragged Shanda from the car. Tony and Hope were behind, both unsure of exactly what to do. Shanda was placed on a stone bench. Her wrists and legs were tied. The girls began taunting her. Doesn't she have pretty hair? I wonder if she would still be pretty if we cut it all off. Hope was now holding the knife, and she noticed Shanda's Mickey Mouse watch. She pointed to it and said, I like that, and took it off of her wrist. Lori went and got a t-shirt from the car that had a yellow smiley face with a bullet hole through the head and lit it on fire. She turned to Shanda and said, that's what you're going to look like. The girls continued to taunt Shanda, but Lori was concerned that a passerby might see them, so she told the group she knew of a better place where no one at all would see them. The group returned to the car. They stopped at a gas station to get directions. While Hope did that, Tony hopped out and made a call to a friend. She had the opportunity here to run, to tell someone what was happening. She didn't. Instead, she called a friend to make herself feel better. For a couple of moments, she chatted with her friend Mike. She told him about the concert and told him she would see him soon. The girls had to pull into another gas station for directions because, again, they were lost. Hope and Tony saw a couple of boys that they knew and were joking around, telling them to come with them. It was an hour drive to Madison. The boys followed for a bit but turned around. During the drive, Shanda began to beg the girls to just let her go. That only seemed to fuel the girls' cruelty. They mimicked her, they laughed, and they ignored her crying. At one point, she said, I'm going to be in trouble for being out this late. The girls laughed. The girls arrived to a desolate road near Lori's home. They got out. Tony quickly hugged Shanda. Shanda said to her, please tell them not to hurt me. Tony turned away from her and got back into the car. Lori and Melinda brought Shanda out further near the woods. They made her strip her clothing off because Melinda wanted them as a souvenir. She brought them back and threw them into the car. Hope picked up Shanda's white polka dot bra and put it on. Hope and Tony stayed in the car watching what was taking place right in front of them. They turned up the music as not to hear her scream. Lori grabbed Shanda and told Melinda, "Do it." Melinda began to punch her in the stomach. Shanda begged her to stop. She said, "I can't breathe. I have asthma. Please stop." Melinda grabbed her head and smashed her face into her knee. Her new braces cut through her lips. Both girls attacked. They were trying to cut Shanda's neck. Shanda fought. She tried her best to get away, but the girls were too strong. The knife was too dull to slice her neck, so the two took turns stabbing her in the chest and stomach. Lori got on top and tried to strangle her while Melinda held her legs. Melinda had a rope and she placed it around her neck. She pulled it until Shanda stopped moving. They put her body in the trunk and drove to Lori's house. Hope asked, "Is she dead?" And Melinda replied, "Yeah." Hope began crying hysterically. Panicked, she began to drive fast out of the woods and she hit a log that took the muffler off. The car would now attract too much attention, so they had to stay on the back roads and off of the gas. Once back at Lori's house, the girls washed up and Lori got them something to drink. At one point, Lori's dog began to bark, and the girls could hear a faint scream coming from the car. Lori said, "I'll handle this." She grabbed a paring knife from the kitchen. When she returned, there was no more screaming, and once again, she had to wash off the blood. Lori wasn't comfortable staying there. She was worried that maybe Shanda might not be dead, and her parents would hear the screaming. She and Melinda decided to go driving to decide what to do. Hope and Tony were tired and they refused to go. Lori realized her neighbor's lights were on, and she was concerned that perhaps they heard Shanda screaming as well. So she went over there just to be sure that they didn't notice anything. They had a Coke machine on their porch, so she knocked on the door and asked for change for $1, stating she was thirsty. Her neighbor thought Lori was acting strange and asked if she was okay. She told them the muffler story and then left. Lori drove around and they thought of ideas, including throwing Shanda into a river, but they decided against that. Then they discussed burning her. They drove toward a nearby town. At one point, they pulled over to see if Shanda had died yet. They opened the trunk and Shanda tried to sit up. She was covered in blood. She tried to talk, and the one word she got out was "Mommy." Lori hit her in the head with a tire iron. Shanda was a fighter. She knew she had a life to try to live for, a future. But the two girls in the car were in far too deep. There was no way that they were going to let her live. They heard her trying to talk in the trunk, saying Melinda's name, begging. She began to try to kick and claw her way out. They hit the gas to drown out the noise of Shanda struggling. Lori got back out and hit her several more times with the tire iron. She returned and told Melinda and described smashing Shanda's head in. Shanda still didn't give up. The sweet girl with the huge smile who wrote poems and loved her family was clinging to life. Throughout all of this torture, she held on. Each time they would hear her, they would do the same thing. By daylight, they returned to Lori's home to get cleaned up. Shanda was barely alive in the trunk. Lori called a neighbor for gasoline, but he only had kerosene. They were considering a burn pile to ensure she was really gone for good. All four girls left the house. Lori wanted Hope and Tony to see Shanda. Tony refused. The entire trunk was covered in blood. Shanda was unconscious. Hope saw a bottle of Windex in the trunk. She grabbed it and sprayed it on Shanda's wounds. Shanda stirred. The girls watched as she pushed herself up into almost a sitting position. They stared at her to see if she was going to talk, but she couldn't. The fight that Shanda had in her was more than the evil within these girls. As Lori's mom came out of the house, Lori slammed the trunk down on Shanda's head. They drove to another gas station and got gasoline. Shanda was moaning in the back and kicking in the trunk. They left and they arrived at a cornfield on Lemon Road. The girls removed Shanda and wrapped her in a blanket. Melinda did not want to help. She didn't want to touch her. She said it was gross. The girl who started this whole thing was now just over it. She was tired and she wanted to go home. Lori handed Hope the gas, and Hope poured it over her. Tony refused to leave the car, but from where she sat, she saw one of Shanda's arms move. Lori lit the match and the flames exploded. The girls jumped back into the car, but in the rear view, Melinda could see the flames starting to fade quickly. She insisted they go back just in case. Melinda jumped out and poured the rest of the gasoline onto Shanda's burning body. When she returned to the car, she was laughing, telling the girls, "You should have seen it." Her tongue was going in and out of her mouth. The girls got back into the car and drove to a local McDonald's for breakfast. Can you imagine this? These 4 girls have tortured a 12-year-old girl all night long, burned her alive, and are now just casually eating in a McDonald's. During breakfast, Lori picked up one of the sausages and said, "Look, it looks just like Shanda." Meanwhile, Tony was off calling Mikkel, the friend that she was supposed to stay with the night before. She told her that Lori and Melinda had killed a girl. She told her she couldn't talk because she felt like they were watching her, but to come and meet her at her job later. Now, earlier in the day, these girls had made a pact never to tell anybody. They all left and dropped off Hope and Tony. Lori and Melinda went back to Lori's house, but soon Hope called them sobbing. She told them she needed them to come over. She was panicked. When they got there, she was staring at Shanda's watch, saying she couldn't believe what they had done. The girls tried to calm her down, and by 3 p.m. they left and headed back to Melinda's house. Melinda called her friend Crystal, the one from childhood. She told her to come by right away. She told her she couldn't talk on the phone, but it was really important. She also called Amanda, but Amanda was at the mall. Melinda called and had her paged at the mall. Amanda called back collect. When Melinda heard Amanda's voice, she said, "Can we come get you? Something really bad happened. I need to see you. I need to be with you." Amanda asked her what happened, and Melinda said, "Shanda's dead." Amanda, thinking this might be a joke, said, "No, you're joking. You're stupid." But Melinda insisted that Shanda was gone. Crystal arrived to the house, and the 2 girls went through every gruesome detail of Shanda's torture. How she tried to claw her way out of the trunk, how they'd beaten her with a tire iron. Crystal found all of this really difficult to believe, but Lori took a knife out of her coat and showed it to Crystal. Soon they went and picked up Amanda. They told her the same story. Melinda was sobbing, and Amanda hugged her, telling her it would be okay. Neither Crystal nor Amanda really believed that this crazy story was true. Lori insisted they come see inside the trunk. They could see where Shanda's bloody handprints were on the inside of the trunk lid. Shanda's socks were still in there, covered in blood. When Amanda saw them, she went to the side of the house and started to throw up. She came home and asked to be taken home. After dropping her off, the girls went to eat at Taco Bell. When they returned to the car, a song was blaring out of Lori's boombox. It was a song that Lori was singing while she was torturing Shanda. Lori shouted, "I turned this off before we went in. It's Shanda's spirit. She's coming back to haunt us. Let's have a seance and try to talk to her." When they got into the car, Lori said, "When I was hitting her, it was taking chunks out of her head. I remember how it felt to hit her." Melinda yelled for her to just stop, but Lori didn't. She started using the tire iron to hit the dashboard, imitating what she had done, saying, "This is how I did it. Here, smell it," and put it up to Crystal's face. Melinda wondered out loud if God was going to forgive her, and Crystal told her yes. Lori said, "Well, I don't believe in God, and I don't feel bad about killing her." Steve, Shanda's dad, had woken around 4 a.m. to turn off the living room TV. While he was up, he noticed the kitchen door was open. He locked it and went back to bed until 7 a.m. They had plans for the day, and he was expecting a few people over to start working on the house. Steve's wife, Sharon, went to wake Shanda up. Shanda wasn't there. Steve thought maybe she had gone out to let the dog out, and he accidentally locked her out when he closed the door at 4 a.m. He ran outside to check, yelling for her, screaming for her, because it was freezing outside. He went over to the neighbors, but nothing. Meanwhile, Sharon called all of Shanda's friends. Nobody had seen her. Steve began thinking the worst. Maybe someone grabbed her when she went to let the dog out. He and his dad got into the truck and began to search the area. By 1 p.m., he called Jackie, Shanda's mom. They called the sheriff and filed a missing persons report. On Saturday, January 11th of 1992, Don Foley and his brother Ralph decided to go quail hunting. They had this planned, and they began the drive and were passing some fields when they saw something that looked to them like a burnt mannequin. Don got out to inspect. He was staring at it and still thought it could be a doll or a mannequin. He looked down and tried to touch one of the toenails and realized it was real. The girl he was looking at was burnt beyond recognition. She was wearing only a pair of torn blue panties. The brothers immediately turned around to go call the police, and then they returned to her body and waited for the police to arrive. By 1 p.m., the road was blocked off as a crime scene. Both State Trooper Detective Steve Henry and forensics expert Sergeant Curtis Wells received the calls to come out. As they were arriving, both of the men thought maybe someone was playing a joke. The sheriff used to work with Wells, and the man was known to sometimes play pranks. They were looking at the body, and just like the men before them, thought it could be a mannequin. It wasn't until they got close enough they realized they were looking at a young female. Shanda's hands were in the boxing pose, associated with burn victims. The hands tightened in reaction to the intense heat. The blue panties had been pulled to the side to display Shanda's private areas. The men thought this must have been done purposely by some sort of sick pervert. They noticed her anus was harmed, and Shanda seemed to have been left in a sexual type pose. They collected as much evidence as they could to try to help them with the investigation. A Jeffersonville High School class ring with the initials SGH, a gold earring, and hair samples. The investigators had worked for years with horrific crimes, but none of them had ever seen anything like this. They began to go through missing persons report in that town, but there was nothing that they could find. Keep in mind, she wasn't reported missing in this town, but in her hometown. So for a while, she was just kept there as a Jane Doe. Meanwhile, Tony, Hope, and Hope's parents arrived at Tony's house. Tony ran over to her dad and hugged him and said, "Dad, I didn't stay at McKell's last night. I went to Louisville. I'm sorry." Her dad looked down at her and wasn't understanding what she was saying to him. She began to babble and tell him about what had happened the night before, and he was furious. He sent her to her room while he spoke with Hope's parents. Carl Rippey, Hope's dad, said the girls had told him they witnessed a murder. He didn't know all the details yet, but he believed what the girls said was true. Clifton Lawrence asked the Rippeys to go to the police with him to explain what he knew. And they said, "No. We spoke to our attorney, and we've been advised not to speak to the police." They were going to take Hope to a hotel for the night and avoid the police, and they suggested that Clifton does the same with his daughter. He refused and asked them to leave. He went up and spoke to Tony, and he told her directly, "We are going to the police." By 8:30 p.m. that night, 15-year-old Sean Piles came down to report a conversation he had overheard earlier at a local bowling alley. He stated 2 girls were saying they witnessed a murder. The girls seemed to be bragging, but also seemed very nervous. Tony went in with her parents and began to talk to the detectives. She told them she had witnessed a murder. Tony's account of the events were recorded. "I went to New Albany with my 2 friends, Hope Rippey and Lori Tackett. We were in Lori's car. We picked up Lori's friend Melinda. I think she's like 16, but I don't know. She drove us to a hardcore punk concert on Preston Highway in Louisville. While we were driving, Melinda started talking about a girl named Shanda, who was trying to steal her girlfriend. She said she wanted to kill her." The detective asked, "Is that when she started talking about Shanda after you went to Louisville?" "She started talking about her when we were in Louisville. She just said she wanted to teach her a lesson, okay? Melinda's a lesbian, and Melinda's girlfriend is Amanda. Shanda was messing with Amanda, and Amanda, I think, is from like New Albany." They continued to question Tony, asking her for addresses, last names, anything that she could possibly remember. She did remember where Shanda lived, Capitol Hills and Jeffersonville. Wells immediately turned this information over to see if they could locate the missing person, and there was a report from 905 Capitol Hill in Jeffersonville. The person who filed the report was Steve Sharer. Wells called Howard Henry at the Sellersburg Post and gave him the information. He asked him to go over there and talk to Steve Sharer, see what information he could come up with, but he warned him to be very cautious. There were no positive identification on their Jane Doe yet, but he strongly felt that they had the right person. Detective Henry met with Steve. He got as much information as he could on Shanda's disappearance. He also got her dental records. Tony continued her story back at the police station. "At the witch's castle, we walked up there. They took her up there, and Lori tied her legs and hands. They said they were going to cut her hair off. She was crying and begging, 'Please don't do this, Lori. Please don't kill me.' And then she told them, 'Well, my brother will be coming to look for me, and when he comes and doesn't find me there.'" Melinda interrupted her and asked, "Are you trying to scare us?" And she said no. And then they just told her to shut up. They knew Tony was hiding information, but they had to end the interview for the time being. They were seeking out more information on Melinda and Lori, since those seemed to be the 2 main suspects. They made a call to the chief probation officer for the county, who might have more information on either of these girls if they had ever been in trouble. Virgil Shade did have information. If you recall from part 1, Amanda's dad had handed over sexually explicit letters that Melissa was writing to Amanda. So Virgil was able to provide them any information that he had. So now they had those pieces as well. Detective Wells, meanwhile, was putting together the information Tony had provided. He was able to match up the missing girls' information with the Jane Doe that they had found earlier. From all of the information he could gather, the missing girl had been staying at her dad's home in Jeffersonville. The address matched where Tony said they went to get Shanda. At this point, they knew they had the identification, although the dental records haven't confirmed it yet. They had to go and see Steve Sharer. Another detective from Sellersburg was also following the case. He was able to get information on Lori Tackett's car. It was parked behind the Loveless home. They put in for a warrant immediately. The detectives arrived at Steve Sharer's home. The family was sitting inside, hoping for good news. Jackie, Shanda's mom, had only left 30 minutes earlier. They asked Steve to please call her and have her come back. She drove as fast as she could to get there. Detective Henry sat them down and in a low voice told them, "Your daughter's gone." Jackie immediately jumped up, screaming, "No, no, no." Steve just wanted to know, did she die instantly? While the detective knew the answer, he told Steve, yes, she likely did. An arrest warrant was issued for Melinda Loveless and Lori Tackett. Henry and Shipley began the drive to Melinda's house. Several other police officers showed up as well, and they began to bang on the door. Marjorie, Melinda's mother, answered the door and was very confused as to what was happening. They asked if the girls were there, and she said yes. They went up and found Melinda and Lori asleep in bed. They were baffled when they saw Melinda. She was small and pretty, and based on the stories they'd heard, they expected a monster. But sometimes monsters come in very beautiful packages, I suppose. The girls were handcuffed, and Lori asked, "Are we on candid camera?" And the officer replied, "No, this is happening." Melinda's mom kissed her, said, "This is just a misunderstanding. We'll get you out of there soon." Detective Henry turned to Margie and said, "Ma'am, I have a daughter the same age. She has a room just like that. I'm sorry. I am sorry for you. Get a good lawyer." Margie asked him to please watch my baby. She might be suicidal. When they arrived at the police station, Melinda was allowed to call home. She got her stepdad, Mike. "Mike, it's me, Melinda. Can you please tell Mom I'm sorry?" "I am sorry, Mike. It was a friend at school named Shanda. Shanda's dead. I didn't mean to kill her. I just meant to beat her up, and it went too far and it got out of hand." Mike asked Melinda, "How did you kill her? Did you stab her? How did you kill her?" "Well, I punched her in the stomach, and then someone got a knife and cut her. They cut some of her. It was terrible. I didn't mean for this to happen. I'm a good person. I can't talk anymore, Mike. I have to go."
This is your warning. Explicit description to follow. If graphic material bothers you, please fast forward.
The dental records confirmed that the body was Shanda. Her autopsy revealed she had multiple injuries. The upper half of her body was covered in 3rd and 4th degree burns. Her left ear was shriveled by the fire. There were lacerations to the neck, head, and legs. There were wounds on her feet. There was a puncture wound on the back of her neck. Her head was not fractured, but there was evidence of blunt force trauma. There were ligature marks on the wrist and legs. No indication of her being strangled. She was alive when burned because there was soot in the upper airway. There were numerous lacerations inside the anus, indicating she had been sodomized by a blunt cylindrical object. It had been inserted about 3 to 3.5 inches into the anus, causing damage to the inner walls. There was quite a bit of internal bleeding, leading the coroner to believe that she was alive when this assault occurred. A rape kit confirmed no males were involved in the assault. The girls went to court, and they were assigned counsel. It was determined both Melinda and Lori would be tried as adults. Lori was sent to the Indiana Women's Prison for psychiatric evaluation. Melinda was transferred to the Clark County Jail in Jeffersonville to await trial. The trials were set for June 23rd for Melinda and June 25th for Lori. Monday morning, the Indiana police released a statement to the media. The story was all over the news and newspapers. Monday morning, a young teen named Jeffrey Stetton-Benz went to the Sellersburg Post accompanied by his mother. 2 officers sat down with Jeffrey. He was friends with Amanda and Melinda. He was present at the mall on Saturday the 11th. He was also there a few days earlier on a 3-way call with Melinda and Amanda. Melinda informed them she planned on killing Shanda. Another student reported information in the case as well. Dale Gettings from Jeffersonville High School said he knew Crystal and a girl named Thea talking about the murder. Detective Henry went to speak to the girls. When approached, Crystal said she knew nothing. But when he approached Thea, she gave Crystal up, stating Crystal was withholding information. Crystal made no further comments that day. Tony and Hope were in court on Monday. Their attorneys wanted the girls tried as juveniles in exchange for their cooperation against Melinda and Lori. If tried as juveniles, the girls would serve their time in a girls' school for a maximum of 6 years. Each of the girls would need to take and pass a lie detector, but neither girl was coming forward to do so. In fact, neither girl would speak much at all for a while. The chief prosecutor was named Guy Townsend. He had only been in office for about 18 months when all of this happened. He had never tried a murder case, and he knew he might be dealing with a death penalty case. He didn't know if he was up for that task. When he went into court and saw Melinda, he said, quote, "The first time I saw Melinda Lovelace, I thought she was one of the most beautiful girls I'd ever seen. I remember thinking I might have a hard time convincing a jury to convict this girl. She was that attractive." End quote. The reporters were everywhere. They crowded the hallways of the courthouse, hoping for a soundbite. Rumors were rampant. Some were saying the girls were part of a satanic cult, which of course concerned the people in the town, but many who knew the girls just dismissed this theory. There was one experienced reporter named John McGrath, and he told other reporters he learned the girls were in a lesbian love triangle. This story was a media dream. The judge did release a report, and it stated Melinda Lovelace was jealous of Shanda and wanted to kill her because she thought the girl was trying to steal her girlfriend. When the media heard this, they went wild. They went to the schools. They parked out downtown, asking everybody what they thought. They went to the murder scene on Lemon Road. They sat in front of Kraft's funeral home, waiting for the body to be delivered. The mortician was onto them. He had a decoy arrive at the entrance up front as her body was delivered to the back. A friend of Jackie's, named Jamie Rainey, helped arrange the services. He had viewed Shanda's body, and when Jackie arrived with the clothing she had chosen for her daughter to wear, her favorite jeans and sweatshirt, Jamie told Jackie he could not put them on her. Her body was in such bad shape, it just wasn't possible. They decided to cover her in a bed of roses. As if all that these parents endured wasn't enough. When each of them would arrive home at night, the media was waiting in front of their homes, pushing them for a reaction, anything that they could get from the parents. They would come knocking at the door over and over again. They would be refused, but that didn't stop them. They would stay parked out there until nightfall and then just come back and try again. All day on Tuesday, friends and relatives were paying respects. Some tried sneaking in, only to be told to leave. So they set up across the road, filming crying teenagers and relatives as they left. The church mass was the following day at Our Lady of Perpetual Help Catholic Church. Her parents allowed a film crew in to the interior of the church if they agreed to share the footage with other news stations. Reverend Fink gave a eulogy. He read a poem. The poem said, "God made the world with its towering trees, majestic mountains, and restless seas." And then he paused and said it needs one more thing, something to touch and dance and sing. So God made little girls. When he completed his task, he was pleased, for the world seen through a little girl's eyes greatly resembles paradise. He looked at Jackie and Steve and said, "Your beloved Shanda now lives in paradise." She was buried beside her grandmother. In the following days, her parents were hounded by reporters. They wanted an interview, but neither was comfortable talking about her relationship with Amanda, as neither really understood it themselves. So, like many who are hungry for a story, whether it's real or fabricated, they began to spin their own narrative. Some placed the blame on Shanda's parents, wondering how they allowed their 12-year-old to become involved in such a tangled, toxic situation. Callers would call up radio hosts to give their opinions. It was the usual. "If that were my child, this wouldn't have happened because I keep an eye on my kids." Or, "If those parents had just done their job, that little girl would still be alive." Both Jackie and Steve, as well as their spouses, were hearing the things being said, and this broke their hearts further. They knew their daughter was loved beyond measure. They'd done their very best. They knew that she knew she was loved and cared for. But that didn't stop these people from saying the most horrific things about them. None of these people knew them. They only knew the rumors floating around, so they took them and ran with them with no regard for how the parents were suffering. The investigation into all four girls continued, even with Lori and Melinda sitting in jail. The chief investigator, Steve Henry, knew what Tony had told them couldn't be entirely true. Her timeline of being dropped off before Shanda was burned just didn't sit right with him. She claimed she was dropped off at home at 9:45. If that were true, Lori and Melinda could have not driven to Lemon Road and set Shanda on fire until well after 10 a.m. Her burnt body was already cold when the Foley brothers found her around 10:30. Henry went to check out the information that Tony provided about the stop at the gas station to buy the gas. There was no record of a 2-liter bottle of soft drinks bought at the time Tony claimed. She had said they bought it and the girls emptied it to fill it with gas. But he did find that at 8:40 a.m., there was a 2-liter of Pepsi and several dollars worth of gas bought. So he drove to the Lemon Road site and then to McDonald's. He checked his watch. It was 9:30 a.m. He knew then Tony was lying. He knew he needed to speak to her again, but her father had already informed them she wouldn't be speaking again. Hope's family attorney said Hope was not ready to give a statement. They were able to speak to Amanda's family, who had also hired an attorney. Their attorney had the detectives conduct the interview in the attorney's office. Amanda was nervous and reluctant to say anything about her relationship with either Melinda or Shanda. Just that Melinda was jealous. She did admit that. She said Melinda had called her the night of the concert and it was just chatting, nothing else. It was evident to the police that Amanda intended on trying to protect Melinda and minimizing any involvement that Melinda had. She was trying to place more of the blame on Lori. She described how Lori bragged about it, told her details, while saying Melinda told her it was mostly Lori. The detectives knew Amanda had a sexual relationship with both girls based on the letters that they had received from the probation officer. They also knew that Melinda had informed Amanda she wanted Shanda dead. They weren't getting very far with Amanda. She seemed firm that it was mostly Lori and Melinda was just there. They went on to interview Carrie Pope. She confirmed that Melinda spoke of killing Shanda constantly and that Lori had a huge fascination with death and killing someone. She told them the ways that Lori would talk about killing someone, including burning them. When asked if she knew who actually burned Shanda, which girls did it, Carrie said it was Lori and Hope. They asked if Tony was present as well, and Carrie said yes. The police had been trying to get in touch with Crystal as well. She had refused twice, but finally wrote a letter. She too was working to help Melinda and mainly spoke about Lori. How Lori tried making her smell the tire iron and how she bragged about beating Shanda with it. The forensics in the case were very frustrating. The knives had no blood stains to match Shanda's, and they had been unable to find her fingerprints inside the trunk. There was no blood on the tire iron either. However, there was blood in the trunk, and they were able to match that to Shanda's blood type. They were also able to get blanket fibers in the trunk that matched the blanket that Shanda was burned in. Some of those fibers were still clutched in her hands when they found her. While looking around, Henry did find a pair of shoes on a dirt road near Lori's home. This was an area that Tony described. He bagged them up as evidence and contacted Jackie. Those were the shoes she had gotten her for Christmas. While in that area, Henry went to look at Lori's room. But when he arrived, he saw that Peggy Tackett had just about emptied her daughter's room. She told him, quote, "Lori is beyond my control. If I had known about that little girl in the trunk, I would have tried to save her," end quote. It appeared to him that the Tacketts had already given up on Lori. About a month after her daughter's death, Jackie was cleaning up Shanda's room. She looked in the closet and there was a box in there. It was marked, "For my eyes only, please do not read." Inside were a ton of letters from Amanda and 2 from Melinda. Jackie then realized what her daughter must have been dealing with. The manipulation, the emotional toll it had to have taken on her daughter to keep all of this quiet, not only from her parents, but from everyone. She turned the letters over to Detective Henry. The psychologists at the Indiana State Women's Prison had completed their report on Lori. I'm going to read you that report now. Mary, which is Lori's given name, is a bright, articulate adolescent whose intellect is clear and unimpaired. Her spelling is near perfect. She has a very high social intelligence. Her IQ has been recorded as 110. She is likely without any intellectual, perceptual, or cognitive impairments. She is very anxious about her circumstances and her future. She feels hopeless and doomed. She is seeking rescue with a strong sense of desperation and is inventing and enumerating every symptom she can think of or ever heard of. She spoke most typically in a low, expressionless monotone without making any eye contact. She appeared sad and anxious most of the time, animated and enthusiastic only when speaking of her beliefs in her psychic powers and various aspects of her New Age philosophy, which appear to be a mix of spiritualism and hippieism left over from the 60s with an emphasis on ESP. She discussed drinking alcohol and experimented with marijuana, but her main outlet was cutting herself. Her case history showed on one occasion she was at Tony Lawrence's home and cut herself so severely she had to be taken to the hospital. She was taken in for counseling, but it ended after a month because her parents could not afford it. In speaking with that doctor, Dr. Smith, they had also submitted a report. It stated, Mary claims her mother was physically abusive, including kicking, beating, and choking her, for which her mother was once arrested when Mary was 13. Abuse was daily after school between ages of 9 and 13. After her mother's arrest, Mary began to rebel openly by using makeup and clothing prohibited by their religion. Mary also described stepping in between her mother and father when her father was beating her mother with a baseball bat. He struck her several times on the head and shoulders. She told Dr. Smith she had little to no memories of childhood, but she told Dr. Shriver she began having hallucinations at age 2. Dr. Shriver wrote, the hallucinations include millions of dots, dark specks, lights, Mickey Mouse, a tall elf man who looked like a cricket, someone who looked like Cousin It from the Addams Family, hands coming out of the floors, and UFOs. She claimed to hear voices moaning, whispering, and telling her to come with them. She still hears them on and off daily. She said they sound like little demons. At times, they've ordered her to hurt people, her parents or friends, telling her to destroy them. She believes she has been psychic all her life. She claimed to see auras around people. She says she has the ability to travel, to be aware of what is happening in other places. She claims to be able to channel vampires and other dead people. The main focus of Dr. Shriver's report discusses Lori's claims of being raped at an early age, despite saying she has no memories before age 10. She claims a cousin raped her at 4, a neighbor at 6, another neighbor at 9, and another neighbor at 16. Each time, she developed a new personality. Her personalities in order are Sissy, who appeared at age 3, Sarah at age 4, although the rape was at age 6, Darlene at age 9, Gino, a male, at age 15 when she decided she was gay, and Deanna, who is 23 years old, around age 16. Darlene, Gino, and Deanna were all present when she killed Shanda, but Lori herself was not present. Dr. Shriver asked Lori to produce one of the alter egos, and she was eager to do so. She chose Deanna, the 23-year-old. She dropped her eyelids and raised her face with a different expression and a degree of mischievous. Mary's own expressions and manners also remained. She said she had to maintain Deanna, and afterwards she was exhausted. None of these behaviors is typically reported in the studies of multiple personalities. Shriver's summary. She is desperate at the moment to avoid conviction and a prison sentence. She appears quite willing to fabricate and exaggerate symptoms in order to support a defense of insanity and avoid prosecution. Her claims of multiple personalities are calculated to produce an impression of severe psychosis and achieve a commitment to a mental institution. Mary seems to believe that if her normal personality was unconscious at the time of the offense, she cannot be held responsible for the behavior or for other personalities. For example, if Dina was present at the time of the offense, then the court could punish her. But they couldn't punish Sissy and Sarah because they were not there at the time. She sincerely believes that she cannot be held responsible for the actions of her alter egos for which she claims to have no control. Side note, however, she just summoned one of them just a moment ago in this report. Back to the report. In the conclusion, the report indicates that while Lori, Mary, is deeply disturbed, she was not insane, and she was capable of standing trial. Guy Townsend was sent a copy of this report. Townsend knew the case was strong, but Lori and Melinda were now pointing at each other. And in order to make that work, a jury would need to be convinced by one of them beyond reasonable doubt, making it possible that one could be convicted and the other could walk. Townsend wanted a plea agreement to avoid trial altogether. He offered each girl the opportunity to plead guilty to one count of murder with a sentence of 30 to 60 years, but neither attorney seemed interested at the time. They knew Hope and Tony would need to cooperate in order to convict the girls, and neither of them had been talking. Townsend went to Tony and Hope and made an offer. He told them if Tony's story was true, if they didn't actually participate in any way, that he would treat them as juveniles and not put them into the adult court. It wasn't until Melinda's attorney, Mike Waldrow, told Townsend that Melinda claimed it was Hope who poured the gasoline on Shanda before she was set on fire, that he realized he was grateful that Hope did not accept that offer. If he had agreed to try her as a juvenile and then later found out that she was actually the one who poured the gas, it would have been a miscarriage of justice, and it would have been his fault. After about a month of getting nowhere with Tony and Hope, he decided he was going to have to put the pressure on. He was going to bring charges against both of them and put them in jail to see if a little bit of time behind bars might persuade them to change their mind. Now, while all of this had been going on, neither of the girls had gone back to school. They didn't want to face other students. They didn't want to face reporters who were everywhere and still very aggressive trying to get a story. They did, however, speak on the phone now and then. Hope had admitted to Tony that she was the one who did pour the gas, and Tony had no idea. She was shocked because she hadn't seen who had poured the gas, and she now realized she lied to the police. Tony was already a mess. She was living in constant fear. She never left the house. She didn't go to her own bedroom to sleep at night. She was sleeping on her parents' floor in their bedroom. She even had to be accompanied to the bathroom by her mother. She was thinking that maybe one of the girl's friends was going to come kill her. Hope was also struggling with nightmares and guilt, and she would wake up with terrors in the middle of the night. It was bad for both of them. They knew something was coming, they just didn't know when. But on March 15th, both girls were brought into court. Judge Todd brought them into adult court. Both were charged with murder, arson, aggravated battery, battery with a deadly weapon, criminal confinement, and intimidation. They were separated, and Hope was sent to Madison, and Tony was sent to Scott County Jail. On the same day, both Lori and Melinda were brought into court for additional charges, including child molestation and criminal deviant conduct. So now, Tony and Hope are in jail. Melinda and Lori are sent back to where they had been. It took about 5 weeks for Tony to break. On April 22nd, Tony accepted the state's offer. Townsend dropped all other charges, and Tony pled guilty to the charge of criminal confinement for keeping Shanda captive. So now Tony's agreeing. She will testify against the other girls, and she's going to face between 6 and 20 years in prison. Tony was hoping or thinking, she's young. So she's thinking, okay, I agree to this, and now I'm going to get bail, and I'm going to get out of here until their trial. And I'm going to be free. But of course, that's not how things work. She was still there, and by August, she decided to store up the depression medication she was supposed to be taking and took a bunch of them all at once. She was found on the floor in her cell unconscious, and she was flown to Corsair Children's Hospital in Louisville. She was in a coma for 5 days. Meanwhile, the friends of the girls, the Leatherberries and Carrie, were outraged that Tony turned. They hatched a plan, because they couldn't get to Tony, she was in prison, to attack Tony's parents. They went around and bought all these weapons, and they were infuriated. They talked about what they were going to do to Tony's parents, but thankfully Carrie panicked and made them turn around, and she called Henry to confess. Now, Lori, she was not doing well in prison. She was constantly in trouble. She was cutting herself. She was fighting with other people. She hid a razor blade, which I'm presuming she was going to use against somebody else. She had pulled a sink out of the wall. She was involved in yet another toxic love relationship with a girl named Kim in there. We're going to get to that whole situation in part 3 of this. Indiana prisoners get 1 day taken off at the end of their sentence for each good day of time served. By the end of 6 months, Lori did not have 1 good day to get off the end of her sentence. She had nothing. She was getting time added on because of her antics in the prison. Now, this case was not like any that the attorneys or the judge had ever seen. Judge Todd had never presided over a case with this much attention. He had deep personal feelings on the case, but they were so deep that he was determined not to let them get in the way. He wanted to make sure he was being fair and objective. In my personal opinion, he went way too far the other way. He accommodated quite a bit on the defense side, including allowing Melinda's attorney to hire a second counsel with public defender money. The second counsel was Russell Johnson, a young but experienced defense attorney from Franklin, Indiana. He had quite a reputation for being one of the best. Even though he was young, he had tried a couple of cases and he was very successful. The initial allowance was 300 hours at $60 an hour. But Russell said, well, after the $18,000 is gone, I'm not going to be working doing this case anymore. Melinda's parents heard about this and agreed to sell their home if Russell's bill was more than the $18,000. So they were assigned public defenders because they didn't have money. And then there is a balance of money that you can pay the public defender. So her original attorney goes and gets a second counsel and promises to pay him public defender money. Okay. He is so popular and, successful that he's like, well, I'm not going to work for this. I'll only work up until I hit the 18K. Melinda's parents hear about this and agree to sell their home. You're not allowed to do that. So when the prosecutor Townsend hears about all this, he files a motion to get Judge Todd removed from the case because Todd knew about this arrangement. Townsend's issue was, just as I was just saying, when someone's assigned a public defender, they don't accept payments from the defendant's family. So Todd and Townsend battled, and I believe Townsend was right in this case. It's not typical to find a judge who's going to allow things like this, but in any case, he did. So Townsend felt like, well, I have a trick up my sleeve to remedy the situation. He could file for the death penalty against Melinda and Lori. This was a risk because of 133 people put to death in Indiana, only 3 were under the age of 18. But doing this could disqualify the current attorneys because they were not death penalty qualified. In Indiana, you need to have 5 years of criminal trial experience, at least 5 felony cases, and be a lead or co-lead counsel on a previous death penalty case. Neither of these attorneys had those qualifications, but Judge Todd elected to keep them both on. That was surprising to me as well. I'm thinking if there are these qualifications, they are there for a reason. But as I said, Judge Todd had very strong emotional feelings about this, and he did not want to make any mistakes when it came to the defense because he did not want to blow this situation. Now, Toni gradually came out of her coma. She had to go to therapy at LifeSpring Mental Health. And in September, she was admitted to LaRue Carter Memorial in Indianapolis for further therapy. So after all of this, there was a summary report written upon her release, and we're going to read that now. My impression is that Toni has learned over the years that there are no consequences to her behavior. She was unable to discuss the wrongful behavior in which she participated in Shanda's death, and assumes that because she was not physically striking some of the blows, she is therefore not responsible for anything that happened. She claimed she is not responsible because she was so afraid of these girls. But she had several opportunities before Shanda was killed to call home or to leave or to call someone for help, and she did not. The family comment that Toni has gone back and forth between feeling remorse and feeling she did nothing wrong. So they asked the family for input, and that's what they said. They couldn't read her. She felt nothing, and then she feels guilty. Back to the report. There does not seem to be a genuine concern or empathy for the child who was murdered. They categorized her as a follower, whose intelligence appeared to be low average. She continued on that Toni considered herself ugly and always has. Part of the therapy called for her to give written answers to various questions. So one of the questions was, "What do you believe in?" Toni wrote, "I believe in God, love at first sight, premarital sex, having babies out of wedlock, and peace." To the question, "What would you change about yourself?" she wrote, "I'd like to change the way I judge and trust because I don't take time to think. I make quick decisions and I trust people too easy. I'd also like to change my looks. I don't like my glasses. I need a little more meat on my bones. I'd like to be prettier and a couple inches taller. I'd like to live a healthy life because I don't like being suicidal and depressed and sick all the time." When asked to say something about her feelings, Toni wrote the following: "I'm very confused, angry, sad, and I feel suicidal. I'm confused because of all of the shit that's going on in my life. I'm angry because you're making me do these stupid questions again, and I'm sad because I want to go home to be with my family. And I'm suicidal because I think it's the only way to completely get out of this mess. I'm worried because I'm afraid I'm going to succeed in killing myself one of these days, and because my 97-year-old great-granny doesn't know anything that's going on in my life, and I'm scared she's going to have a heart attack when she finds out." In another part of the paper, Toni wrote what she hoped to be doing in 10 years. "I want to have 1 kid and adopt 2 kids. I want to have a well-paying job and my husband to have a well-paying job. I want to live in a big house in the country with 10 Mustangs. I want a vacation home in the Bahamas. I want to go to France for 2 years because I studied French for 2 years. I hope to have gotten all this mess behind me and finished with it all. I'd like to stay close to my family." In closing, Schubert wrote that the staff at LaRue Carter found Tony to be a morally salvageable adolescent, provided she should be placed in a program that includes education, psychotherapy, and plans for eventually re-entering into the home community after her legal obligations had been satisfied. End of report. So now that Tony was being released, Townsend wanted Melinda and Lori to accept his final offer of a plea agreement. He said he would not seek the death penalty. He would drop all of the charges against the girls if they would plead to murder, arson, and criminal confinement. The plea meant that the girls would face between 30 to 60 years. In exchange for this deal, the girls would have to agree to give statements and testify against the others at their sentencing hearings. On September 21st, the day before the expiration deadline, both Melinda and Lori accepted the deals. In part 3, the final part, we will be discussing the trial and what the girls were doing behind bars. I want to thank you for listening, and if you've enjoyed it, please consider following this podcast. For those listening on a podcast service, you can consider joining us over on YouTube. My true crime channel is Chasing Truth, and a more casual chat channel is Chasing Truth Unplugged. Thank you so much for your support. And there we are. What a crazy story. And we're not even done. I know this was rough. This was a rough one to listen to. But, you think kids get in trouble, they're going to change some things, maybe. You just wait. You just wait. I'm going to record the rest of it. I don't know. Hopefully, I don't know. Soon. But I got to go get ready. I have to test all the fish tanks before Scott and I go out tonight. So I thank you guys so much for being in here. I appreciate it. You guys are awesome. I will leave this up for members. I'm not going to leave it up for everybody else because I do want to make a couple of edits. But thank you guys for being here. I appreciate it. Thanks, Lucy. I'm trying. I am trying. So, and we'll get ready to start working on the next one. There are some videos that I'm going to be doing on Chasing Truth as well. There's a lot of crime stuff that I have written down here that I'd like to do lives on. So we will start doing those as well. Thank you guys for coming in, and I will talk to you very soon. It is sad, Monique. It gets just, you'll see. It gets something. You'll see. Love you guys. Bye.